That's the first thing I heard when I walked into my parents' house. 6 hours of driving from the Denver airport, no warning, no heads up, just something in my chest that wouldn't let me wait another day. A mother's instinct, I guess. The voice came from my mother. The laughter? That came from my sister's twin daughters, Jade and Harper, curled up on the living room couch like they owned the place, snacking on cupcakes and watching a phone screen as if they were in some teen movie. And in the middle of the chaos, barely tall enough to reach the sink, even with a plastic step stool, was my daughter, Sophie, 6 years old, barely learned how to tie her own shoes, and she was scrubbing plates. Her tiny hands trembled as she tried to rinse a ceramic bowl with a crack down the middle. Her sleeves were wet up to her elbows, and her ponytail had come loose, stuck to the back of her neck with sweat and soap. I stood frozen for a second, not because I was surprised, but because deep down some part of me already knew. I took one step forward. "Mom," I said. She didn't flinch, didn't even look up. "Well, if it isn't the runaway," she muttered, arms crossed, apron stained with God knows what. Melissa, my older sister, glanced up from her phone and flashed a half smile, half pity, half smirk. "Didn't know you were coming," she said. "You look tired." Not a single word of welcome. Not a single hello for Sophie. I moved into the kitchen. Sophie still hadn't noticed me. She was too focused scrubbing like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. In this house, not doing things right could turn into an entire lecture on gratitude and discipline, and how Melissa's kids never needed reminding. I crouched down slowly. "Sophie." She turned. Her eyes locked with Minnie and they widened, flooded with relief. But she didn't run to me. She didn't even smile. Just stood there, frozen, bowl still in her hands. I realized in that moment, she thought she'd get in trouble for stopping. That was when I said it. One word. Enough. The air in the room shifted. Melissa raised an eyebrow. My mother paused, drying her hands on the kitchen towel with forced calm. "What's the big deal?" she said. "We're just teaching her responsibility." "She's 6, I replied. Dad peeked out from the hallway and muttered, "Kids need structure." I looked around that house, my childhood home, where every corner used to carry my secrets, my dreams, my bruises, and I realized something chilling. They hadn't changed. They just had new targets. And this time, they picked the one person I would never let them break. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. Instead, I reached for Sophie's hand. "We're leaving," I said. Melissa rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic." But I wasn't. I was done. Done pretending. Done performing. Done explaining to people who confuse cruelty with tradition. As I walked out the door with my daughter, she finally whispered, "Do I still have to finish the dishes?" I bent down, looked her in the eye, and said, "No, baby. You're not here to clean up their mess anymore." And that's when everything changed. Back at the motel, Sophie was asleep within minutes. Curled into the corner of the queen bed, arms tucked under her favorite stuffed fox, like she was finally safe enough to let go. I sat at the edge, still wearing my jacket, shoes unlaced, staring, thinking, regretting. Not about leaving, but about not doing it sooner. See, for years I told myself it was just the way my family was. Tough love, harsh words, a little favoritism. Sure, but it didn't mean they didn't care. I swallowed the excuses like medicine, bitter but supposedly necessary. I stayed quiet, especially after Dad's stroke, when things got hard and someone had to step up. That someone had always been me. When Melissa's husband left and she just needed time to figure things out, I quietly picked up the mortgage. When Mom said things were tight, I wired money without a second question. It was always supposed to be temporary. A few months. A year, maybe. It became 4. 4 years of sending payments every month, never late, never thanked. Not once did they ask if I could afford it. Not once did they acknowledge that I was the reason they were still in that house. But even that didn't sting as much as seeing Sophie there, shoulders hunched, fingers red from hot water, doing chores while her cousins lounged around in dresses I had probably bought them for Christmas. She had never complained, not once. Every visit to Grandma's came with a nervous smile and a whispered, "I'll try my best, Mommy." She always tried. Always wanted to be accepted, to be loved by people who saw her as little more than a burden, the lesser child of the lesser daughter. Once, after our last visit for Thanksgiving, I found her in her room, organizing her socks by color. I asked her why. She said, "Because Grandma says good girls keep things neat." She was 5. And it hit me then, this wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. The same house that chipped away at my confidence for years was starting on her. It didn't slap or scream the way some abuse does. It cut in silence, in expectations, in comparisons, in cold juice for Jade and Harper, and tap water for Sophie, in the way please turned into prove you deserve it. They were molding her, the way they tried to mold me. But I remembered how that felt carrying around a sense that you had to earn love, that your worth depended on being quiet, helpful, low maintenance. That every no you said came with a cost. I'd learned to walk on eggshells before I could ride a bike, and now, my daughter was learning it too. That night, I pulled out my laptop. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, just that I needed something to change. A new place to live, a different school, maybe even therapy. Anything that didn't involve her growing up thinking she was second best. Then I remembered something else, my last phone call with Mom, weeks ago. She had casually said, "Don't forget your transfer on the 10th, like it was her money to manage, like I was the employee, and she was the boss. I had laughed politely. But deep down, something cracked. That crack had now become a doorway, and I was finally ready to walk through. Sophie and I packed up our motel room quietly. She asked if we were going home. I told her, "Not yet, baby. We've got something to take care of first." I drove us to the nearest diner and ordered pancakes with strawberry, her favorite. She smiled softly but kept checking the time, like she was worried we'd be late getting back. She didn't know yet that we weren't going back at all. While she colored the paper placemat with a dull red crayon, I opened my phone and pulled up the number I hadn't dialed in over a year. Martin Ramirez, the loan officer I had worked with back when I refinanced the house for my parents in 2019. He answered on the second ring. "Rachel Carter," he said, surprised. "Haven't heard from you in a while." "I'm ready to end the support on 26 Meadow Ridge Lane," I said, effective immediately. There was a pause. "You sure?" I didn't even blink. "Yes." They've had 4 years. They never paid me back. They never even said thank you. I'm done pretending it's my responsibility. He gave a low whistle. "I'll get the paperwork started." "You'll get an email this afternoon." I hung up, and for the first time in years, I felt the burn of my own voice in a scream. Not in anger, but in clarity. My hands weren't shaking. I didn't feel guilty. I felt done. We left the diner and went to the park. Sophie chased ducks and laughed when one tried to bite her shoe. I sat on the bench and watched her, really watched her, and I realized just how small she still was, just how fragile, and how cruel I had been to keep bringing her into a house that treated her like a problem to be fixed. Later that day, the first email arrived. Confirmation of autopay cancellation. Grace period ends in 10 days. Auction process begins after 30. I stared at the screen, then closed my phone. they wouldn't notice right away. They'd still be sitting in that kitchen, still bossing her around like she was the help. Still offering juice to Melissa's twins, and handing Sophie a chipped cup filled from the tap. Still telling each other how they raised strong girls while turning softness into shame. But the house they stood in, the throne they treated like a legacy, it was already crumbling. That night, my mother called. "Rachel, the bank sent a notice. Something about a missed payment? Did you forget?" I smiled. "No mistake, Mom. I stopped paying." There was silence on the line. "Why would you do that?" she finally asked. Her voice lost its edge, replaced with something like confusion, maybe even fear. We thought you were helping out of love." "No," I said calmly. "I was helping out of habit, but love doesn't sound like what I heard yesterday. It doesn't look like my daughter washing your dishes while you let her cousins laugh." She stumbled through something about discipline and teaching lessons, but I didn't stay to hear it. I ended the call. Because some moments don't need explanation, they just need closure. That night, Sophie curled up next to me on the motel bed, her fingers wrapped around mine, her breathing slow. Her cheeks finally soft with sleep, not stress. And in the quiet, I whispered, more to myself than her, "We don't owe them any more silence." That night, long after Sophie fell asleep, I sat by the bathroom sink in the dark, just listening to the hum of the mini fridge. I should have felt proud, empowered, free. Instead, I felt hollow. Not regret, not doubt. Just that quiet ache that settles in when you realize you've been loyal to the wrong people for far too long. Memories started pouring in like slow poison. Birthday mornings where Melissa got breakfast in bed while I was told to clean the dishes before school. Holidays where she opened expensive gifts wrapped in glittery paper while mine came in plastic bags with clearance tags still on. I was always the gritty one. The realistic one. The one they said didn't need praise because I could handle it. Even after I left home, the script followed me. Dad's stroke hit hard. Melissa had just lost her job, so naturally they turned to me. "You're the strong one, Rachel. You always pull through." So I did. I worked overtime, skipped vacations, put off buying a new car. Every time I made that mortgage payment for their house, I told myself it was temporary, that one day they'd see what I'd done for them, that maybe, just maybe, they'd say it, "Thank you." But that day never came. Instead, I got calls about missing a deadline or "don't forget your wire this month." No warmth, just expectation. And then, Sophie. She came into my life like a sunbeam through a locked window. I swore I'd raise her different, that she'd never wonder if she was good enough, never have to earn love. And yet there she stood, just yesterday, scrubbing a bowl in my mother's kitchen while her own grandmother called her useless. I failed her. In trying to keep the family intact, I had passed the silence down like an heirloom. That's what broke me. Not the money, not the betrayal. But the image of Sophie standing there, her little fingers clenched in soapy water, too afraid to cry. She had already learned the lesson I'd spent a lifetime trying to unlearn. Be useful, or be invisible. That next morning, we stopped by a grocery store to grab some breakfast. As we walked past the greeting card aisle, Sophie tugged my hand. "Can I get Grandma a card?" I paused. "Why, sweetheart?" Because she looked mad yesterday. "Maybe if I say sorry, she'll like me again." I knelt down and looked her right in the eyes. "You never have to apologize for being yourself. Not to me. Not to anyone. Do you understand?" She nodded, but her eyes didn't believe me yet. That hurt more than anything else. Later, at the motel, she whispered something I'll never forget. "Do I have to stay strong forever?" And I broke. Not in anger, not in rage, but in sorrow. I held her close and said, "No, baby, you don't. That's my job now." I realized then this wasn't just a messy family fight. This was a legacy, a pattern, one I was either going to continue or end. And in that silence, surrounded by cheap wallpaper and motel linens, I made a decision. I wouldn't just leave that house behind. I'd leave behind everything it ever taught me about love, loyalty, and what a daughter is worth. It came with paperwork. A Tuesday morning, gray sky, coffee gone cold on the nightstand. I sat at the small table in our motel room and filled out the last of the forms to cancel my financial support for the house on Meadow Ridge Lane. No loopholes, no delays, just the quiet click of digital confirmation. Done. I looked over at Sophie, who was playing with a stack of index cards, writing little affirmations she had seen online. I had told her once that words have power. She believed it more than I ever had. She held one up. I am enough. That was my signal. That afternoon, I made a second call to a charter school across town that specialized in social-emotional learning. I had heard about it from a client once, but always thought it was out of reach. Now, nothing was out of reach, because everything toxic had already been left behind. The school still had space for fall enrollment. We toured it the next morning. The classrooms were filled with sunlight and color and kids who were taught to ask questions, not just follow orders. Sophie didn't stop smiling the whole time. When we left, she turned to me and said, "Can we really go here?" I knelt beside her, pulled her close, and said, "We're not going back, Sophie. Not to that house. Not to that version of family." That evening, my phone rang. "Mom." I let it buzz until it stopped. Then it rang again, and finally, I picked up. "Rachel," she said, her voice already shaking. "The foreclosure letter came today. There must be some mix-up. The bank says we're behind 3 months, but no mix-up," I said quietly. "What do you mean?" "I mean I stopped paying." Silence. But why?" she stammered. "We thought you were doing this because you loved us." "That's not what love looks like, Mom," I said. "Not when you let a 6-year-old get bullied in your kitchen while you stand there and do nothing. Not when my daughter learns that crying makes her weak and silence makes her safe. I won't finance that anymore. Not with money. Not with presents. Not with forgiveness." She tried again. "But it's our family home. It's a house," I said. "A house I've kept standing with my money while you tore it apart with your pride." I hung up. There was nothing left to say. The next few days felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. We found a rental cottage near the school, a modest little place with chipped blue shutters and a garden out back. The landlord offered me a discount when he found out I was a single mom. "You're building something," he said. "I can see it." We moved in that weekend. No ceremony, no housewarming party. Just 2 suitcases, a set of thrift store plates, and a mother-daughter bond stronger than it had ever been. On our first night, Sophie set the table with a candle she had made in art class. She folded napkins into hearts and whispered, "This feels like home already." And it did. Because home wasn't marble countertops or old family photos. It was peace. It was truth. It was a place where no one raised their voice to feel powerful. And that night, for the first time in forever, I slept without bracing for the next betrayal. We had finally started over. And this time, it was ours. The foreclosure went through the following month. I didn't attend the auction. I didn't even check the listing. I didn't need to. Melissa called first. Her voice was sharp, breathless. "You've ruined everything." I didn't flinch. I didn't ruin it. I just stopped financing the lie. She went off something about how the twins had their memories in that house. How Mom and Dad were humiliated, how I had no right. And maybe, once upon a time, that would have broken me. But now, I simply said, "Where was that concern when Sophie was washing your dishes while your daughters laughed at her?" Click. No more defending. No more explaining to people who never once thought to ask what my daughter was going through in that house. The texts started rolling in after that. Aunt Sharon, family doesn't evict family. Uncle Ray, your father's blood pressure is spiking because of you. Grandma, they took care of you your whole life. How could you be so cruel? And the one that hit hardest, me mother. Just 2 lines. She's not one of us. Maybe she takes after her father. She meant Sophie, the little girl who brought her handmade cards, who asked for permission before taking seconds, who still whispered please even when ignored. That was when I knew they hadn't learned a thing. Not from the foreclosure, not from the silence, not from the absence. They still thought love was conditional. Still thought I could be guilted back into submission, that if they pushed the right button, I'd rush back to patch the cracks and save their legacy. But they didn't understand. I didn't just cancel the payments. I canceled the cycle, and I didn't reply with anger. Just clarity. You lost the house. You lost the money. Now you've lost the last thread of access to me and to her. We're done. Then I blocked every number, every email, every reminder of the version of me they relied on. The one who gave everything and asked for nothing, because Sophie deserved better, and so did I. That weekend, we celebrated Sophie's 7th birthday in our new place. Nothing fancy, just a backyard barbecue, some neighbors, her art teacher, my college roommate, and a chocolate cake with extra frosting. No screaming, no tension, no lessons, just joy. When it came time for cake, Sophie blew out her candles and looked up at me with the biggest, brightest smile I had ever seen. She didn't ask where Grandma or Aunt Melissa were. She didn't look for anyone who wasn't there. She was present, finally. That night, as I tucked her in, she whispered, "Mom, this was the best birthday ever," and I believed her. Because this time, there were no strings, no silent conditions, no invisible measuring stick she had to meet, just to feel loved, just safety, and love, and peace. Back on Meadow Ridge Lane, the house sold to a retired couple from South Carolina. A real estate investor scooped it up, flipped it, and made it beautiful again. I saw the listing by accident one day. The porch had been redone, the siding painted blue, the dead garden replaced with sunflowers. It looked nothing like the house I had once saved from falling apart. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel responsible for it. I didn't feel anything, because I hadn't destroyed that place. I had simply let it fall. And in doing so, I stood up for the first time, truly for us. Spring arrived quietly. The trees behind our rental cottage bloomed in soft pinks and whites. Sophie started drawing again, really drawing. Her stick figures weren't hiding behind corners anymore. They stood in wide open spaces, holding hands, smiling under skies with names like hope and peace. One afternoon, while sorting through old storage boxes, she held up a framed photo. It was from years ago, Sophie standing next to my mother, her face stiff, eyes distant, smile more like a wince than joy. She looked at it for a long time, then asked, "Can I throw this away now?" I nodded. She didn't hesitate, just dropped it face down into the trash bin. That's when I knew. The cycle hadn't just been interrupted, it had ended, not with yelling or slamming doors, but with a child choosing what stays in her story and what gets left behind. They still try to rewrite it, of course. Rumors float through extended family, that I lost it, that I overreacted, that I stole their home out of spite. Melissa has told anyone who'd listen that I was jealous. that the bank misled me, that I destroyed our family's legacy out of insecurity. But they never mention what came before. They leave out the image of a 6-year-old being humiliated in silence. They forget the handmade cards, the cracked cups, the cracked hearts. That's okay. I've stopped defending the truth, because truth doesn't need a defense when you finally learn how to live inside it. Instead, I focused forward. I enrolled Sophie in music and mindfulness classes. We traveled to the Grand Canyon, then to Boston, then to Oregon. Just the two of us, exploring what it meant to breathe without tiptoeing. And quietly, I launched a little side project called Kindness First, a foundation for children like Sophie, kids dismissed, overlooked, or emotionally neglected by the very people meant to love them. No media. No spotlight, just art supplies, therapy grants, mentorship, healing by action. One of my cousins messaged me months later. I saw what happened. I wish I'd said something. I saw how they treated you and her. I thanked her, genuinely, but told her, we're not looking backward anymore, because some families aren't lost to tragedy. They're peeled away by truth layer by layer until all that's left is the light and the knowing that you were never broken, just buried. And now I wasn't just surviving, I was leading. Every night, Sophie sleeps peacefully in her room, her nightlight shaped like a moon, her bookshelf full of stories that make her laugh not shrink. Sometimes, we drive past Meadow Ridge. She always asks the same thing. Mom, will we ever go back? And every time I give her the same answer, I smile, steady, certain. No, sweetheart, we didn't just leave that house. We outgrew it, because the best revenge isn't rage. It's peace. It's a little girl who no longer flinches when someone raises their voice. It's a home where love doesn't have to be earned. It's a mother who didn't just walk away from what broke her but burned the blueprint entirely and built something softer, stronger, and real, for both of them, for good. Have you ever had to walk away not out of anger, but out of love for someone who deserved better? If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or had to become the protector no one else would be, leave a comment below and tell us. What would you have done in Rachel's shoes? Because your story matters too, and if you believe in inspiring stories that break the silence, heartwarming stories that rebuild what was lost, you're in the right place. Subscribe now for more stories like this, real, raw, and restorative. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next moment of quiet strength. This is what healing sounds like, and we'll be here every week to remind you, you're not alone, not anymore.